Thank you for your time and the nice phone call earlier. As promised, I would like to inform you about the decision we came to. You convinced us that you will be a hard worker for the routines, but with a creative mindset as well as good team skills and knowledge in digital marketing. Therefore, we would like to offer you the position of an internship in the internet marketing team. Yes. So, when I got the placement confirmed, as you just seen, there was a bunch of thoughts going through my mind. Firstly, I'm going to make sure that this is going to be a holiday for me. Secondly, I'm looking forward to wearing suits and ties every day, dressing really smart. And number three, whilst I'm working there, I really want to make an important impact on the company. I leave a stamp and they remember me and hopefully have opportunities for future employment. Now, in regards to the latter statement, I knew that one key trait that would actually help me make an impact at the company, listening more effectively. Hayes in 2002 stated that there are 4 basic skills that everybody needs in order to demonstrate that they can listen effectively: attending, listening, empathy and probing. Now, I demonstrated most of these skills naturally, working as an Indian door drummer at various events where I had to build bonds with DJs and clients. Now, one of the things that I stayed conscious of whilst working was not to get distracted by my surroundings, as I knew it would be rather professional whilst listening to someone. Out of the 4 skills that Hayes presented, the one that I'd say I struggled with the most was the empathy side of things. As during the early stages of work, when I first arrived in the office, I was struggling to understand certain things that were spoken about in the meetings, where we had a lot of internal lingo being used and a whole bunch of abbreviations, which of course I wasn't going to understand straight away. So it was pretty hard for me to listen and take a grasp of what actually came about in that meeting. What I tended to do was speak to my manager or my supervisor afterwards to find out exactly what those lingos meant or what those abbreviations meant, so the meetings would actually make some sense to me. Now, going back to my initial thoughts again, so my first day at Texas Instruments arrived, and of course I dressed in a shirt and a tie, and I entered this huge building. It was like something out of an American movie. I immediately realised as soon as I entered the marketing communications department that I was dressed way too formally. This was a surprise for me actually, as I always assumed working in an office for a huge global company, especially a conservative one like TI, would mean that you have to dress in a certain way, tie, you have to look the part. I equated sort of having success within the business to dressing in this sort of way. That's why I always assumed when I used to see these business people in London dressing really smart all the time. Now, what Linsell Roberts in 2010 stated in her book is that although some businesses have a relaxed dress code, such as TI, it's very important for the employees to understand when it's appropriate to dress formally, but also switch to a more formal dress code. So when we had external meetings, such as the agencies coming in or the worldwide communications team coming in, or we were hosting presentations for the big quarterly reviews, that's when I brought out the blazer, like so. I knew straight away that during these meetings is when I could start dressing smart again. But now is not one of the times where I need to wear a blazer, so let's get it off. That's better. So after my first week of working in Texas Instruments, where I spent the majority of time on an intensive crash course learning how to use the software for the role that I was responsible for, which was social media, I only had 4 days from Monday to Thursday to actually learn everything from that. I reflected on the week, and in respect to Shun's 1991 model, reflection on action and inaction, I reflected on action and realised that I need to do my own research into social media. I need to read the blogs, I need to find out what works well, what doesn't work well, how to get engagement, what the best types of campaigns are, and what our competitors are doing. But I also realised that I need to find out what the other teams across the communications department are doing, and also actually within my team of internet marketing, what the individual roles are for me to be able to work effectively in the future. So I decided, as well as reading a bunch of social media blogs, I would set up meetings with key members and managers of 6 different teams within communications, and invite all the interns to that as well, so all the new people are learning from the team at the same time, find out their responsibilities. And these meetings were actually a crucial point as it was my initial meeting with these colleagues as well. Besides a simple introduction, I was able to demonstrate my interpersonal skills immediately by showing interest in them personally as well as professionally. A guy named Argyle in 1984 said that those that demonstrate social competence are able to produce desired effects on people in social situations. And throughout this video I'll be talking about real life examples backing up Argyle's theory through my experience. Now I spent the rest of June and July conducting my experiments to discover at first hand what works well and what doesn't on social media. Now, using all the information I gathered from reading those blogs, which I did due to reflecting on action, I immediately comprehended that working within social media, even if someone had like 5 years experience, would take a lot of trial and error learning. Now, trial and error learning, or selecting and connecting, as Edward Thorndike in 2002 liked to call it, is a type of incremental learning where one tries different solutions in a problem-solving situation until an effective solution is realized. Now, in my experience, my problem-solving situation was, of course, that I had to increase engagement on Facebook, Twitter and Google+, as well as getting more people to follow us on these pages. What I did, as I mentioned earlier, I conducted a bunch of different experiments to find out what works best. So I tried posting at different times in the morning, different times in the evening, in the afternoon. I tried different types of posts where I'm asking questions, posts where I tell a joke with a cliffhanger, a post where I state a fact, an engineering fact, posts with pictures, videos, without pictures and videos, so it's just plain text. And I pretty much learned from doing all these experiments what times work best and what sort of posts work best based on which times got the most engagement and which posts got the most engagement. Thorndike concluded that this type of learning, even though it is basic, is the most successful type of learning. However, I think in a real life situation, this method would only prove successful if the person using it has no time constraints, and hence why employers these days tend to only employ people with experience. Now, luckily in my situation, social media was quite new to the European team, so it's pretty much my duty to actually introduce this tool and implement it into our communications strategy and portfolio completely, as it was something brand new that the team was not using as much as they should have. Then when it came to August is when I started pulling out the big results and getting features in the Marcom's bi-weekly reports that were being sent out to our communications director, who would then send it to the president of Europe. So it was a pretty big deal, and it was making me feel quite self-fulfilled actually, and very achievement motivated, as Macmillan recognised, mainly due to the fact that social media had never been put into these reports before. And since me coming into the company, people were starting to talk about it as far as the president of Europe, so it was a pretty big deal for me, and I felt really motivated to carry on these big results. By this quarter, I was actually fully immersed into my responsibilities, taking full ownership of social media in the EMEA region, to the point where I was actually referred to as the social media guru. During September, there was a time where a colleague within my team, my supervisor actually, was planning to go on holiday for 2 weeks, and as I was her support in some of her roles, which was web maintenance and paid search, it was my responsibility to completely take the helm during the 2 weeks while she was away. Now, web maintenance and consultation was something I was introduced to early, back in around July time, so I was already picking that up whilst doing my social media role, and had the hang of it. It was easy for me to handle, but paid search was something that was brand new to me, only recently got introduced to me before I realised that I was going to be taking the helm. And a big part of the paid search role was to communicate and coordinate between the campaign owners internally and our search agency, which was external, just to make sure that the new search campaigns going out were done on time and that the campaign results were delivered to our internal team on time for them to measure successful results. Now, I assume that my manager allowed me to take on all these responsibilities on the basis of the halo effect as introduced by Kessler in 2010. Now, even though I was demonstrating an outstanding performance in social media within my first 3 months of being in the company, and also showing my proactiveness and willingness to grow, I did lack the organisational skills to balance so many different responsibilities with ease. But luckily, my adaptation and my acceptance to the circumstances allowed me to persevere, and I believe that these two skills are fundamentally very important when working within any business, as changes will always occur for employees to have to adapt to. Rather than dwelling and complaining about them, it's more efficient to just accept them, get on with the task at hand. Now, Shaw's 2007 mentioned these two skills within his book, where he goes on to say how important it is to be able to demonstrate these skills, particularly when working within a new cultural environment, which is exactly what I was in. I was working for an American company in German as an English native, so it was something that I definitely had to have prior to coming within the business. And it was something that I had from moving schools a few times, from performing up and down the country with my drums. Now, as October came around, my colleague had returned, so I no longer had the responsibility of completely owning paid search and balancing essentially 3 complete job roles as one person. I did miss the intensity and the responsibility of having all these on top of me at once. I feel as though having all this pressure of work makes me work actually a lot harder. So what I did was ask my manager whether I can jump on email management, which is something that I hadn't dabbled in before, and I knew that my colleague within that field could do with some help with balancing his workload, because he was doing email management and customer intelligence by himself, which is a very time-consuming role. So I quickly learnt the processes behind email management and how to operate the software through mainly repetition learning, which is said to be one of the principles of learning, and with practice repetition, people can gain new skills, said Howe in 2012. Now, to manage my time more appropriately, my colleague and I alternated weekly the management of emails. So one week I was completely owning the calendar and sending out the campaigns into our software for our agency to pick up and send out, and then the next week he'll be conducting that job for the week. So pretty much one week I'll have a higher workload, and the next week I'd have less, and it'll be the same for him as well, which actually worked out very effective for us, as we were able to concentrate on our other responsibilities whilst we never had that extra bit of work. It basically allowed him more free time to work more effectively in his customer intelligence role, which was becoming more popular amongst the sales organisation. So I was actually really glad that I could help out a colleague, whilst also gaining new skills in a field that I was interested in. And in the process I was learning also HTML skills through repetition of changing, slightly tweaking some of the emails that had errors. So I ended up picking up 2 or 3 skills which I never would have had if I didn't volunteer to do this role. Now, around November, things started to get a lot more intense with my workload again, as I had the project to recreate and relaunch Text Instruments' European homepage. Now, this is a page which hadn't been updated since about 2011, so it was very outdated, it looked very old, it was never used internally or externally, as we realised when I conducted a report on the page views, which was around 15,000 from January to November of 2013, so it was very low in comparison to our other regional pages. During this time I realised one of my other colleagues was trying to conduct a Christmas campaign, but she was sort of dabbling with ideas of creating an email campaign where we can give customers free items. So what I actually proposed to her is that we have this Christmas calendar on a website instead, because I'm making this European website. I said to her that she can place that calendar on there. So all promotion will be directed to the website that I make, which is updated, and the calendar will be able to be more interactive. Now, because I came up with the suggestion, which was in November, it meant that I all of a sudden had a time constraint to get the updated version of the European homepage done within a couple of weeks. So a lot of pressure was on my hands. Now, I also had another project which I was trying to deal with, which was cleaning up the URLs of our regional pages such as Hungary and Poland and Czech Republic, which were pages that weren't being used as much. Now, this pressure actually resulted in me asking my manager whether I could drop off email marketing due to the lack of organisational skills that I had, which I mentioned earlier. However, my manager convinced me that I should try a little harder and balance my priorities, as when I first arrived I did tell her that one of my key aims that I want to get out of this year is to improve my organisational skills, and she said this is my chance to go and actually do this. Now, as Worth 2009 mentioned in their book, is that the best way of learning organisational skills is by creating a regular routine where you prioritise in order and just get used to the routine where it becomes a nice structure. And this is exactly what I did. I decided to do all of my social media related work, so campaign creation, content creation, results gathering, all on a Monday. Concentrated my entire Monday just on social media, and then for the rest of the week, if I was on emails, I would do it in the morning only. I would focus my morning on emails, and then all of my afternoons would be focused on creating the website and dealing with the URLs. The weeks where I wasn't on emails, then I'd have it even more balanced, so I'd deal with the website in the morning, then deal with the URLs in the evening, and this gave me a nice structure to follow, as I knew exactly what I was going to do at every single time, and it allowed me to manage and balance all these different projects and responsibilities at the same time with ease. Ultimately, having the structure also reduced a lot of stress, which was slowly starting to build on me due to all this pressure, and I became a lot more efficient with my time. And just as Worth recognised in a book, I was able to create a temporary updated version of the European homepage in time for the Christmas calendar to be placed on it, and the results spoke for themselves. It was actually the highest performing campaign that we ever conducted in Europe. Now, as I mentioned, the page only had 15,000 views from January to November. Now, just in December, it got over 90,000 views to the web page due to the Christmas calendar. It was also reported internally that it was a record-breaking number of conversions that we had on this campaign. So having worked so hard and intensely during that past few weeks, it was a major turning point for me, as my name was being mentioned even more in pretty much every report that was being thrown out there due to this campaign, along with, of course, my colleague's name. And it even reached as far as the Worldwide Communications Director, who works directly below the CEO of TI. Now, it was at this point that I realised that even as an intern, I can make an impact to the wider company and not just the European branch of it. The new year has came about now, and having finished 2013 with a huge success as previously mentioned, I immediately started to work on the official relaunch of the European homepage. Now, I still needed to work as fast as possible to get this new page out, to keep up the buzz that we created during Christmas, and I realised this time round it was much easier for me to get the approvals from brand and user interface managers in the US, as I'd already created and developed relationships with these guys whilst working on the Christmas campaign. And also, due to the success of the Christmas campaign, they were more than willing to just agree to anything that I wanted to put forward on this new page. Also, having worked with so many different web developers and designers during the creation of the initial temporary page, it was much easier for me to get designs done and mock-up pages created for this official relaunch. Now, using relationships that I also made with engineers outside of our department, I got direct feedback from them, showing them the mock-ups that the engineers created in order to see what they thought about the page, what they thought about the designs, the images, the content, whether they thought it was relevant, mainly because I knew that they were our target audience. The people that are going to be looking at our pages are engineers, so I thought, why not use these contacts that I made and get them to review the page. And we went back and forth quite a few times based on their feedback. I was making constant changes, at least about 8 to 9 changes on the page, until they were finally satisfied with the page that I came up with. And finally, after all the great feedback and changing the design and content, the page was up and running by mid-February. Now, the process of conducting this project and getting it done within around 4 or 5 weeks was mainly down to the networks that I had built with different people in different departments, from the worldwide team to engineers locally, and it made it a lot easier for me that these people were willing to help me out due to the relationships that I built with them. Now, Shankman and Allen in 2010 stated that some of the benefits of honing networking skills are that it increases access to information and opportunities, it maximizes effects on others, and builds credibility, which I can definitely say that I had this positive networking experience, and it allowed me to reap all those benefits that they mentioned. Now, it particularly helped me out in my social media role, in fact, When there were times when I was struggling to find content and produce content, these networks from various teams were sourcing new content for me. A prime example of this was when I was running a Throwback Thursday campaign, when I was showing really old Texas Instruments chips and parts and products and putting it onto our social media pages. There were some engineers on the third floor in the labs that actually contacted the engineers that they knew were on our floor, on the marketing floor, to ask if they knew who was in charge of the Facebook page. Because I had made the relationship with those engineers on my floor, they immediately directed the third floor engineers to me, and what they actually wanted to tell me was that they loved the campaign and that they had a couple of very old products from the 60s up in their labs that they would love for me to take a picture of and get content from them to put onto our Facebook page. Now this opportunity only arose because I networked with those engineers, so I feel as though this is one of the most important skills that I picked up during my time at Texas Instruments. Something that was going on through the last couple of months but came into full integration around March time was our PR agency trying to support social media. Now, as my manager recognised that it was the last few months before I was going to leave, and that I'd created such a major impact in increasing fans and engagement on social media, she didn't want this to die down. She didn't want us to decline in content after I left. So she decided that it would be wise for me to devise a plan that allows our PR agency to provide content for us. Now, this was a real challenge for me in the initial stage. I had a couple of meetings with a few members of the PR agency. Only one person was assigned to actually work on the task of doing social media on their behalf, and I realised quite early on that he couldn't actually comprehend the terms of social media. He hadn't had any experience in it. I was pretty much spoon feeding him knowledge. Also, he was not taking any action on the feedback that I was providing him, which was becoming very annoying. It was quite frustrating, the fact that he misunderstood basic elements such as hashtags. Also, the content that he did come up with tended to be irrelevant and ones that were not linked to Texas Instruments in any way, so I couldn't actually use them. Now, eventually, after much contemplation and discussions with my manager on how we can utilise them, I changed the entire strategy of what we require them to provide us. So what I asked them to do is come up with localised content in German of publications that they have sent to them anyway during their PR work that they're doing with us. Now, this allowed the agency to actually provide good quality content now, as it was making more sense to them, as it was something that they did anyway, but they were just giving it in shorter sentences to a social media guy instead. It also allowed us to target Germans, which were one of our key focuses to increase the number of fans from Germany. Although it did take me a while, I believe that in the situation I demonstrated my leadership skills in recognising that my resource is someone who is German and whose English skills are not that great, and also someone who's worked in PR as his career, so he would operate better with the newer strategy that I came up with, which was German language and publications. According to Adair 2013, this very important leadership skill is making efficient and effective use of resources, especially of people's time and knowledge, which is something that I recognised after a few weeks once I realised that he would work a lot better this way. So April was cut short for me, as I had a 2-week holiday planned due to my sister getting married in this month. Now, the 2 weeks where I was working is where my learning curve took a huge leap, and my confidence and understanding of myself accelerated a lot further. Now, this was due to my communications director choosing me out of the entire team to help him with the recruitment campaign. This was due to my success in my social media campaigns and the Christmas campaign. He requested that I come up with a new idea, a new way of targeting students to apply to our communications internship role, and he gave me less than 2 weeks to plan and execute the idea. Therefore, I had to balance this project as well as coming up with 2 weeks worth of social media content whilst I was away, as I did actually have no backup. It was just me and the social media team. And what I actually decided to do was come up with an Easter campaign, which is kind of similar to the Christmas campaign, but with a lot less value and without a website. It was strictly be for Facebook. Now, in theory, this should have actually taken me a long time to conduct and come up with, but due to the networks and experience I had built with working with so many different members of the team, and especially the legal team, I was able to create this entire plan with all the designs, materials and giveaways within merely 3 days. Again, demonstrating how networking and building relationships is very important within a business. It was really simple for me to approach every single business unit leader and ask them for a branded giveaway that they might already have. And I had dealt with the legal representatives so many times that it was easy for her to create terms and conditions for this competition. One of the BU owners also decided to kind of sponsor me in this campaign and provide me with a budget and provide me with €1,000 out of her budget to allow me to conduct a paid Facebook campaign, which of course allowed me to boost this campaign a lot further and reach a much bigger audience than I would have when it was just organic. Most importantly, coming up with this campaign and executing it allowed me to fill up the 12 days that I was going to be away during Easter. Lastly, during those 2 weeks that I had, I actually trained one of our newer team members in social media just in case there was an emergency situation where someone needed to take something down or put up some brand new content. So I showed her the ropes and how to use the software and gave her like a mini handover. Now I really felt like an adult in the situation for the first time, an adult that had been working for a very long time due to the fact that I was teaching people, I was taking responsibility of coming up with campaigns whilst I was on holiday. It wasn't something that was asked of me, it was just something that I knew I had to do myself because I just owned social media that much. Now when I returned in May, I really started to notice my worth and value that I had in the company, as all my colleagues started to genuinely express how much they missed me whilst I was gone, and also my acting backup breathed a sigh of relief as I returned, because she said that taking over my job role, even though it was only for 2 weeks, was a lot of stress for her. This again gave me a sense of achievement motivation, according to Macmillan, in respect to Macmillan, and made me feel like I really made an impact on this company, that I've really achieved something. Now during this month I had to really prepare for a huge presentation where the worldwide director of communications was going to come and sit with each individual team in communications to see how we're getting on. Now my manager requested that we prepare 2 key successes and 2 key issues that we had during the year so far. Now one skill which I identified that I was really weak at when I first started my placement, and I expressed this to my supervisor, was presentation skills. So throughout my experience, whenever an opportunity arose, my supervisor would always make sure that I just presented, just to get my experience in there. Now Sen in 2006 stated that all good managers are ones that are able to collaborate, work on their own and report the results to their superiors through presentations. Thus presentation skills needs to be adequate. Now I believe getting better at presentations takes a lot of confidence and also knowledge of the topic, as I mentioned earlier. Confidence was something that I started to gain due to the positive feedback that my team and my managers were providing me. Thus during this big presentation I was portraying a very positive attitude when speaking to the director, and I think I fluently got out my points whilst also being able to answer her questions coherently. And it's something that I was actually very proud of. It's the first time I think I was able to do that. Also my supervisor recognised the evolution from my previous presentations to that one that I gave on that day. Now as my final weeks of working life were drawing to an end, I, like many of my peers, assumed that the workload would decrease. However, it was the exact opposite. I had so much work piling up on me, much more than I ever had throughout the whole year. I think it's because everyone knew I was leaving, so they were trying to suck out as much ideas and information and campaigns as they could as possible. People from random teams were approaching me, asking me for ideas and campaigns. People were asking me to conduct Facebook ads, which they'd never even thought about before. People were asking me to come up with brand new social media, organic campaigns, just for the sake of having their content pushed out there through the communication tool before I left. On top of that, I did have to create a very detailed handover for my replacement to learn from, as she wasn't able to come to TI whilst I was still there, so I couldn't train her directly. At the same time, my manager that I had throughout my whole time was also leaving on maternity, so I had to say my final goodbyes to her, at which point she said that you have been the rock of the team. Now this is something that I didn't actually understand at first, and it took me a while to actually comprehend what she meant. She was actually calling me the foundation of the team, which is probably one of the most positive, amazing feedbacks that I can ever get in my whole life. So, thanks to all the skills and the experience that I'd built up over the previous months that I've mentioned, I was able to complete all the tasks thrown at me within this final month, and still have one entire day to say my goodbyes to everybody. Now this really was an experience. It was my first ever job, and I can definitely say that it helped me discover all of my strengths and also evolve and work on my weaknesses.